So the issue of starter fertilizer on soybeans is always an issue come spring and the early summer season. And the big question is some people don't know what a starter fertilizer actually is. When we talk about starter fertilizer, we're often talking about usually nitrogen and phosphorus. You can also throw in a few micros into the mix also, but it's fertilizer that's applied either close to the seed or actually in the seed furrow. On soybean production, especially in Michigan, Michigan State University does not promote the use of pop-up application due to salt sensitivity in soybeans. One of the other micronutrients that we tend to see deficient in soybean production would be manganese. And manganese, again, tends to express itself on the lower leaves of the plant. You'll get some interveinal green or interveinal yellowing of the plant. And it tends to be a little worse under dry conditions. Under minimal conditions of manganese deficiency, we tend to see that correct itself when we do get a sufficient rainfall. If manganese is truly deficient, typically that will occur on our soils that have a pH of about 6.8 and higher. Some of our lake bed soils, some of our darker colored soils here in the state of Michigan. To correct that, in season, typically we recommend about 1 to 2 pounds of actual manganese to the acre in a foliar application. If you don't see deficiency symptoms correct themselves in about 7 to 10 days, or still not looking at the color of the plant that you really think it should look, follow it up with another application, and then hopefully that situation has corrected itself. Broadcast applications of manganese typically do not have much efficacy, simply because the manganese tends to get bound or fixated by a lot of the clays that are in the soil. So if you do consider an at-plant or a pre-plant application of some sort with a manganese fertilizer, oftentimes the banded application then comes back into play. If you're not set up for banding, you don't have the infrastructure to do banding, that's when you want to then plant for a in-season foliar application. And again, usually about 1 to 2 pounds of manganese to the acre will take care of it. So the question often arises is, do I need to apply nitrogen to my soybean plant? And at least in Michigan, and a lot of our land grant research has shown responses to be fairly inconsistent, especially on our lower producing fields. When I say lower producing, probably if you're in that 60 to 65 bushel to the acre range or under, the responses to an application on soybean are relatively inconsistent, or in some cases just not there. The soybean plant can produce its own nitrogen and produces a lot of nitrogen, more than we often can apply through fertilizer application. Oftentimes, if we do apply nitrogen on soybeans, simply what happens is that soybean plant then produces fewer root nodules. So you're basically offsetting the natural ability of that plant to fix nitrogen with that fertilizer nitrogen application. The question of nitrogen on soybeans, especially at the planting time or with starter fertilizer applications, often arises too. We've played around with pop-up applications of nitrogen, 2x2 banded applications of nitrogen. We have occasionally seen a positive response from the plant side of things. So in a 2x2 application of about 20 pounds of N to the acre, we have seen some bigger plants, more biomass, maybe occasionally a leaf stage or two advanced as compared to where we did not have an N application at planting time on soybeans. The problem is a bushier plant with bigger biomass oftentimes does not correlate to yield. So the soybean checkoff here in the state is very instrumental to my research program at Michigan State and to a lot of other investigators here at MSU. You know, we consider ourselves an independent third-party investigator trying to not only determine what nutrients should be applied to soybean production, but when those nutrients should be applied, and in combination with basic agronomic practices. So a couple of the projects that the soybean checkoff has funded for this year would be, we continue to investigate the impact of organic sources or chicken manure on the soil biology beneath our soybean fields. What does that do to soybean production, but also what does that do to the soil health or the soil biology that is going on underneath that soybean plant. Another project that they have been instrumental in funding for this next growing season is looking at phosphorus applications on soybean. What rate, what timing, do we see a response to pea fertilizer on soybean production? And a third project that the checkoff has funded for this upcoming growing season that we continue to investigate is where should a soybean producer invest their dollars? Which nutrient, which fungicide, is it a growth regulator? Is it insecticide? Is there a combination? So what we're looking at is multiple inputs and trying to determine in a normal growing season, where does the soybean producer get the most bang for their buck?